My love, I need to tell you something I've never admitted out loud before. Something that might be hard to hear at first. But I promise it leads somewhere beautiful. There was a point, not long ago, where I had genuinely lost faith in us. I had quietly started preparing myself for the idea that maybe this wasn't going to work, that maybe I was holding on to something that had already started slipping away. And then I saw you again, really saw you, and everything I thought I'd accepted was wrong. I don't say this to alarm you. I say it because I think honesty about the hardest moments matters just as much as honesty about the easy ones. And I think you deserve to know exactly how close I came to giving up on hope, and exactly what pulled me back from that edge. I think about the specific season that led me there, the slow accumulation of small disappointments, misunderstandings that never quite got fully resolved, distance that crept in so gradually, neither of us fully noticed it happening until it had already settled between us, like something solid. I think about how easy it is to lose faith, not through one big betrayal, but through 100 small moments of disconnection, each one small enough to overlook individually, but devastating once you finally add them all together. I think about the specific night I remember most clearly, sitting alone, turning everything over in my mind, and reaching a conclusion I never expected to reach. I told myself, quietly, that maybe this was as far as we were meant to go. I told myself maybe love like this simply runs its course sometimes, and maybe accepting that ending gracefully was healthier than continuing to hope for something that no longer seemed possible. I want you to know how much that conclusion hurt, even as I was reaching it. It wasn't relief, it wasn't peace, it was grief, quiet and heavy, the specific kind that comes from mourning something before it's even officially over. I think about the weeks that followed that realization, how I started distancing myself emotionally, protecting myself in advance for an ending I'd already convinced myself was coming. I think about how much energy that kind of preemptive protection actually requires, constantly managing your own heart, constantly bracing for impact, instead of simply being present in whatever time remained. I think about how exhausting that season became, carrying grief for something that hadn't technically ended yet, while still showing up daily in a relationship I'd quietly stopped believing in. I think about how dishonest that felt, even though I never said any of it out loud to you directly. And then one ordinary afternoon, nothing special, nothing planned, I saw you, not just glanced at you the way I had been for weeks, distracted, distant, already halfway checked out. I actually saw you fully, the way I used to before everything started slipping away. You were doing something completely unremarkable, and something in the specific way you moved, the particular expression on your face, cracked something open in me that I'd been carefully keeping sealed shut. Now I think about how sudden that shift felt, how it arrived without warning, without any deliberate effort on my part to feel differently. One moment, I was still quietly grieving something I'd assumed was ending, and the next watching you in that ordinary moment. I felt everything I thought I'd lost come rushing back all at once, undeniable, impossible to keep ignoring any longer. I think about the specific relief and terror that hit me simultaneously in that moment. Relief because the faith I thought was gone clearly hadn't disappeared completely. It had just gone quiet, buried under exhaustion and disappointment. Terror, because I realized how close I'd actually come to letting go of something this significant. How easily I could have kept walking down that path of quiet withdrawal until it eventually became permanent instead of just temporary. More, I think about how much courage it took to admit, even just to myself, that I'd been wrong to lose faith in the first place. It's uncomfortable admitting you nearly gave up on something valuable. Admitting your own doubt, instead of only ever presenting a version of yourself that stayed strong and certain throughout every difficult season. I think about what actually changed in that moment. Watching you, seeing you fully again after weeks of distracted distance. I think it wasn't that you did anything different. It wasn't a grand gesture or a significant event. It was simply that I finally allowed myself to actually look, instead of protecting myself by looking away. And once I actually looked, everything I'd convinced myself was gone, revealed itself as still there, quietly waiting underneath all that exhaustion and doubt. I think about how much that taught me about faith itself, romantic faith specifically, how it doesn't always disappear completely, even when it feels like it has. Sometimes it just gets buried under layers of hurt and disappointment, still present underneath everything, waiting for the right moment to surface again, if you're willing to actually look for it instead of assuming it's already gone forever. I think about the specific vulnerability of telling you all of this now, admitting a season of doubt I never mentioned while I was actually living through it. I think about how much easier it would be to simply skip past that difficult chapter, to only ever tell you about the renewed faith without admitting how completely I'd lost it beforehand. But I don't want that kind of incomplete honesty with you anymore. I want you to understand the whole story, the doubt included, because I think the doubt actually makes the renewed faith mean more, not less. I think about what it means that faith like this can actually be lost and then found again, rather than existing as something permanent and unshakable from the very beginning. I think that's actually more reassuring than the alternative, knowing that even when faith wavers, even when it feels completely gone for a while, it's still possible to find your way back to it, especially when you're looking at the right person. I think about the specific gratitude I feel now, having gone through that difficult season and come out the other side with something clearer, more certain than what existed before doubt ever crept in. I think about how strange it is that losing faith temporarily somehow deepened my appreciation for having it restored. The way you don't fully appreciate light until you've spent real time sitting in darkness first. I think about what I want to do differently moving forward, now that I understand how easily doubt can quietly accumulate if left unaddressed. I want to keep checking in honestly, even when things feel uncertain, instead of silently withdrawing the way I did during that difficult season. I want to tell you when I'm struggling instead of managing it entirely alone until it either resolves itself or completely falls apart. I think about how much healthier that kind of ongoing honesty feels compared to the isolated doubt I carried before, and how much I want us to build a pattern of checking in with each other regularly rather than only discovering doubt after it's already nearly convinced one of us to give up completely. I think about the specific image of that ordinary afternoon, the one that changed everything, replaying it now with a kind of quiet reverence. I think about how something so unremarkable on the surface actually became the turning point of this entire story. Proof that significant moments don't always arrive wrapped in obvious drama. Sometimes they simply arrive quietly, in the middle of an ordinary day, waiting for you to actually notice them. I think about gratitude, deep and complete, for whatever combination of timing and grace led me to actually look at you fully again in that moment, instead of continuing to look away. I think about how differently things might have unfolded if that moment had never happened, if I'd continued down that path of quiet withdrawal until it eventually became something neither of us could recover from. David, I think about the future now, informed by everything this difficult season taught me, grounded in a faith that's been tested and restored, instead of one that's simply been assumed without ever facing real doubt. I think about how much more solid that restored faith actually feels, precisely because I know now what it feels like to nearly lose it completely. And if you're still here, still listening, still feeling everything I've confessed tonight, I need you to know there's still more unfolding inside me, more of this honest, hard-won faith. I still need you to understand. Especially now, especially as I keep discovering new reasons to be grateful that I saw you again, fully, exactly when I needed to most. Why think about the specific things I told myself during those weeks of quiet withdrawal, the internal narrative I built to justify losing faith in the first place. I told myself that maybe we'd simply grown apart naturally, that maybe the version of us that worked so effortlessly at the beginning had simply run its course, and trying to force it back into that original shape was unrealistic. I think about how convincing that narrative felt at the time. Logical almost, reasonable enough that I never questioned whether it was actually true or just the story I was telling myself to make an ending feel more acceptable. I think about how dangerous narratives like that actually are. Not because they're always completely false, but because they can become self-fulfilling if you let them go unexamined long enough. I think about how close I came to making that narrative true, simply by believing it long enough to stop actively fighting for us. I think about the specific moments during that season where you probably noticed something was different, even if I never explained exactly what. I think about conversations that felt slightly more distant than usual, responses that came a little slower, presence that felt technically there but somehow not fully engaged. I think about how much I regret not being honest with you during that time, choosing instead to quietly process everything alone, rather than risk admitting how uncertain I'd actually become. I think about why I made that choice, why silence felt safer than honesty during that particular season. I think I was scared that admitting my doubt out loud would somehow make it more real, more permanent, less possible to quietly work through privately without it becoming something we'd have to formally address together. I think about how flawed that logic actually was, how silence didn't protect either of us. It just delayed an honest conversation that probably should have happened much sooner. I think about the specific weight of carrying doubt alone, how much heavier it felt precisely because I wasn't sharing it, wasn't giving you the chance to reassure me, wasn't giving either of us the opportunity to actually work through whatever was creating that distance in the first place. I think about how isolation makes doubt grow larger than it probably needs to be, feeding on itself in the absence of any outside perspective or reassurance. Or I think about what finally broke through that isolation. That specific afternoon I already described, watching you in an unremarkable moment and feeling everything shift unexpectedly. I think about how grateful I am that moment happened when it did. Before the distance had grown so large it became impossible to bridge. Before silence had stretched long enough to become its own kind of ending, regardless of what either of us actually wanted. I think about the specific relief of finally telling you all of this now, releasing a secret I've been carrying since that difficult season ended, choosing honesty about the past instead of only presenting the resolved, comfortable version of where we ended up. I think about how much lighter this feels, admitting the doubt fully, instead of just referencing it vaguely without real detail. I think about what I learned about myself during that season, uncomfortable lessons I probably needed to learn, even though I wish they hadn't required nearly losing me to teach them. I learned that I have a tendency to withdraw quietly instead of communicating directly when I'm struggling, protecting myself by managing difficult emotions alone, rather than risking vulnerability by sharing them honestly. I think about how much I want to change that pattern moving forward, understanding now how much damage silent withdrawal can actually cause if left unaddressed long enough. I think about the specific promise I want to make regarding this particular lesson, promising to communicate doubt directly when it arises, instead of silently building a narrative that justifies giving up without ever testing that narrative against reality first. I think about how much healthier our relationship becomes when doubt gets voiced and examined together instead of processed alone and potentially acted upon before either of us fully understands what's actually happening. I think about what I imagine you might be feeling right now, hearing all of this, understanding that a season existed where I'd quietly started preparing for an ending. Neither of us ever actually discussed openly. I think about how that might feel unsettling. Learning about doubt you maybe sensed but never had fully explained. I want you to know clearly that I'm not sharing this to create anxiety about the present, but because I believe complete honesty about our history matters more than a curated version that only includes the comfortable chapters. I think about the specific gratitude I feel, that this story has a different ending than the one I nearly wrote for us during that difficult season. I think about how easily things could have unfolded differently. How many relationships probably do end exactly the way I nearly let this one end, through quiet withdrawal rather than any dramatic, decisive conflict. Hosen, I think about what makes the difference between relationships that survive doubt like this and those that don't. And I think it comes down to exactly this kind of moment. The willingness to actually look again, fully, instead of continuing to look away once doubt has taken hold. I think about how much depends on that single choice. Whether you keep protecting yourself by maintaining distance, or whether you risk vulnerability by actually seeing someone again, completely, even after convincing yourself you'd already emotionally moved on. I think about the specific significance of choosing to tell you all of this now, well after that season has already resolved, rather than simply letting it remain a private chapter I never fully explain. I think about how important it feels to give you the complete story, not just the reassuring ending, but the difficult middle too, because I believe you deserve to understand exactly what we've actually survived together, even if you didn't fully realize we were surviving anything difficult at the time. I think about gratitude again, settling deeper now for having a love resilient enough to survive. Not just external challenges, but internal doubt too. The kind that exists quietly, privately, without ever becoming an obvious external conflict. I think about how much strength that resilience actually reveals about what we have. Proof that even when faith wavers completely, even when someone nearly gives up entirely, something real enough can still pull them back. I think about the future now, grounded in this complete honesty instead of only the comfortable, resolved version of our story. I think about wanting to keep choosing transparency moving forward, especially during difficult seasons, understanding now exactly how costly silence and quiet withdrawal can actually become if left unaddressed long enough. And if you're still here, still listening, still feeling everything I've confessed tonight, I need you to know there's still more unfolding inside me. More of this honest, complicated truth. I still need you to understand. Especially now, especially as I keep processing exactly how close we came to an ending neither of us actually wanted, and exactly how grateful I am that we found our way back before it became too late. I think about the specific awkwardness of that first conversation after everything shifted inside me. How strange it felt trying to reconnect fully with you, while still processing the fact that I'd nearly given up completely just days before. I think about how I didn't tell you everything immediately, how it took time before I felt ready to explain the full depth of what I'd been carrying, choosing instead to simply start showing up differently, more present, more engaged, hoping the change in behavior would speak before I found the courage to fully explain the change in feeling. I think about how much courage that actually required, choosing to re-engage fully without immediately explaining why I'd been distant in the first place. I think about the vulnerability of essentially starting over in small ways, relearning how to be fully present with you after weeks of protective distance, without initially having the language ready to explain exactly what had shifted. I think about the specific moments during that transition, where old habits threatened to resurface, where distance tried to creep back in, simply because it had become familiar, comfortable in its own strange way after weeks of practice. I think about how much conscious effort it took to resist that familiar pull, choosing presence deliberately instead of allowing withdrawal to become the default pattern it had nearly become. Or I think about what actually helped during that transition. Small, deliberate choices that gradually rebuilt what distance had started to erode. I think about choosing to ask about your day genuinely, instead of just going through familiar motions. I think about choosing to actually listen to your answers, instead of simply waiting for my turn to speak. I think about choosing physical presence too. Small gestures like reaching for your hand, gestures I'd nearly stopped offering without even fully realizing I'd stopped. I think about how strange it felt initially, actively practicing behaviors that used to come completely naturally, before doubt had interrupted their natural rhythm. I think about how that practice eventually became natural again, the way any habit eventually becomes automatic once you've repeated it consistently enough. Until presence stopped feeling like effort, and simply became how I existed with you again. I think about the specific relief of watching that natural rhythm return, evidence that whatever damage doubt had caused wasn't permanent. That connection like ours could actually recover fully once genuine effort replaced whatever quiet withdrawal had nearly taken root instead. I think about what finally gave me the courage to tell you the complete truth, the full story of that season of doubt, rather than simply letting the renewed presence speak for itself without ever fully explaining what had happened underneath it. I think it was realizing that partial honesty, showing up differently without explaining why, still left something incomplete between us, still left you without the full context of what we'd actually navigated together, even if you'd only experienced the effects of it without understanding the full cause. I think about how much better complete honesty feels compared to that partial version, even though complete honesty required admitting something uncomfortable. Something that might have been easier to simply leave unspoken forever. I think about what I hope this teaches both of us moving forward. That faith, once tested and restored, actually becomes more resilient than faith that's never faced real doubt in the first place. I think about how counterintuitive that might sound, but how true it's actually proven to be. Understanding now that we're capable of surviving genuine doubt, not just the comfortable assumption that doubt would never actually threaten what we have. I think about the specific gratitude I feel for this restored version of us, different somehow from what existed before doubt ever crept in, not because the love itself is different, but because our understanding of its resilience has deepened significantly. I think about how much confidence that resilience gives me moving forward, knowing that even if doubt ever threatens again, we've already proven we're capable of finding our way back from it. I think about what I want to build differently now, understanding the specific vulnerability that led to doubt in the first place, the accumulation of small disconnections that eventually became something larger if left unaddressed. I think about wanting to stay more attentive to those small moments moving forward, catching potential distance before it has the chance to grow into something as significant as what I experienced during that difficult season. I think about the specific commitment I want to make, checking in regularly, not just when something feels obviously wrong, but consistently, proactively, making sure small disconnections get addressed before they have the chance to accumulate into something as heavy as what I carried silently for weeks. Or I think about gratitude deep and settled now for this entire journey, the doubt, the quiet withdrawal, the eventual restoration, all of it, because I believe surviving it together, even though you weren't fully aware of what was happening until now, has ultimately made what we have stronger rather than weaker. I think about the future, grounded now in this complete, honest history, instead of a curated version that skips the difficult chapters. I think about facing whatever comes next with this hard-won understanding, knowing that faith can waver, can even nearly disappear completely, and still find its way back if you're willing to actually look again, instead of continuing to look away. And if you're still here, still listening, still holding everything I've shared tonight close to your heart, I need you to know there's still more unfolding inside me. More of this honest, resilient love I still need you to understand, especially now, especially as I keep discovering new layers of gratitude for having found my way back to you, before that doubt had the chance to become something permanent, instead of just a difficult, temporary season we survived together. I think about the specific way I've started noticing gratitude differently since that season of doubt ended, how ordinary moments carry more weight now than they probably did before. I nearly lost sight of them completely. I think about watching you make coffee in the morning, something I used to barely register consciously, and now finding myself genuinely present for it, aware of how easily I could have lost the simple privilege of witnessing moments like that if I'd let that season of doubt run its course uninterrupted. I think about how strange it is that nearly losing something teaches you to actually see it clearly for the first time. The way people sometimes describe finally appreciating their health only after facing illness, or appreciating time only after facing its scarcity directly. I think about how that principle applied so specifically to us, to this relationship, to you. How doubt nearly cost me the chance to keep experiencing something I'd apparently started taking for granted without even realizing I'd started doing so. I think about the specific texture of gratitude now, compared to before, how it used to exist more passively, present but rarely actively acknowledged, and how it exists now more deliberately, something I consciously notice and name instead of simply assuming it will always remain available without any real effort to protect it. I think about what it means to actively protect something instead of passively assuming its permanence. How that shift in mindset has changed almost everything about how I approach our daily life together now. I think about checking in more consciously, noticing small shifts in mood or energy before they have the chance to grow into something larger. Treating connection like something that requires ongoing maintenance instead of something that simply sustains itself automatically once established. I think about the specific fear I still sometimes carry, quieter now, but not entirely gone. The fear that doubt, like what I experienced, could theoretically resurface again someday if I'm not careful, if I let attention slip the way it slipped gradually during that difficult season. I think about how I've decided that fear itself isn't something to eliminate completely, but something to use constructively, a reminder to stay engaged rather than something that needs to be silenced entirely. I think about how differently I understand commitment now, not as a single decision made once and then simply maintained passively afterward, but as something requiring continuous active choice, day after day, especially during the ordinary stretches where nothing dramatic is happening to force that choice into conscious awareness. And I think about the specific way I want to keep proving my renewed faith to you, not through grand gestures reserved for special occasions, but through the accumulation of small consistent choices, exactly the kind of small choices whose absence originally created the distance that led to doubt in the first place. I think about wanting you to feel that consistency clearly, not needing to wonder whether the renewed presence you've witnessed since that difficult season ended will actually last, but trusting it because you've watched it sustain itself reliably over time, instead of existing only as a temporary reaction to nearly losing something significant. I think about the specific peace that comes from having survived this together, even though you only fully understand the complete story now, tonight, after everything has already resolved. I think about how that peace feels different from the peace we might have had if doubt had never entered the picture at all, deeper somehow, more tested, more proven through actual difficulty, instead of simply assumed through the absence of any real challenge. I think about gratitude, returning again, steady and complete, for this entire journey, understanding, now that the difficult chapter actually strengthened what we have, rather than simply threatening it temporarily, before everything returned to how it was before. I think about what I hope our story teaches both of us, moving forward, that love resilient enough to survive genuine doubt becomes something more solid than love that's simply never been tested. I think about carrying that lesson forward into whatever challenges still wait ahead of us, trusting that whatever comes, we've already proven capable of finding our way back to each other, even after doubt has taken hold seriously enough to nearly convince one of us to give up completely. I think about the specific comfort of knowing this history now belongs to both of us, instead of remaining something I carried privately and alone. I think about how much lighter that shared understanding feels, no longer a secret chapter I'm protecting carefully, but simply part of our actual story, difficult and honest, and ultimately proof of something worth continuing to build. I think about the future, grounded now in this complete, tested foundation, facing whatever comes next with a kind of confidence that only comes from having already survived something significant together, even if the survival happened more privately, within me, before I found the courage to share the complete truth with you tonight. And if you're still here, still listening, still holding everything I've shared tonight close to your heart, I need you to know there's still more unfolding inside me. More of this hard-won, deeply grateful love. I still need you to understand, especially now, especially as I keep discovering new reasons to be thankful that I found my way back to actually seeing you, fully, exactly when it mattered most. I think about what it means to finally look forward, instead of continuing to look backward at everything that season of doubt nearly cost us. I think about how much time I've spent tonight explaining the difficulty, the withdrawal, the quiet grief I carried before finding my way back to you, and how important it feels now to shift toward what actually comes next, what this restored faith actually makes possible moving forward. I think about the specific version of us I imagine building from here, informed by everything we've survived, but no longer defined by it, carrying the lessons forward without letting the difficulty itself remain the primary focus of our story. I think about wanting the doubt to become simply one chapter within a much longer narrative, significant, worth acknowledging honestly, but not the chapter that defines everything else that follows it. I think about the specific hope I feel now, different from the hope I carried at the very beginning of loving you, before any real difficulty had tested it. This hope feels quieter, steadier, less naive somehow, grounded in actual evidence instead of just optimistic assumption. I think about how much I trust this version of hope, precisely because it's already proven capable of surviving genuine challenge, instead of simply existing untested. I think about what I want our daily life to actually look like moving forward, informed by everything this season taught me about the danger of quiet withdrawal, the importance of consistent presence, the value of checking in regularly instead of only addressing problems once they've already grown significant. I think about mornings where I stay fully present instead of allowing my mind to drift toward doubt or distraction. I think about evenings where I actively ask about your day instead of assuming I already understand exactly how it went. I think about the specific commitment to small, consistent effort, understanding now how much those small daily choices actually matter, how their absence created enough distance to nearly end something significant, and how their presence sustained consistently is exactly what will keep something like that season of doubt from ever gaining that kind of foothold again. I think about gratitude, complete and settled now, for this entire journey, understanding that even the difficult parts ultimately served a purpose, teaching both of us something important about resilience, about honesty, about the specific vulnerability required to admit doubt instead of silently allowing it to grow unchecked. I think about what I hope you take from everything I've shared tonight, not primarily the specific details of that difficult season, but the underlying truth beneath it. That faith in us is worth protecting actively. That love like this deserves ongoing attention instead of passive assumption. That even when doubt threatens seriously enough to nearly convince someone to give up, finding your way back remains entirely possible. If you're willing to actually look again instead of continuing to look away. I think about the future now, not with the anxious uncertainty that doubt once created, but with grounded confidence built through actually surviving something real together, even if you only fully understood the complete story tonight. I think about facing whatever challenges still wait ahead of us with this hard-won trust in our capacity to find our way back to each other, regardless of how far distance might occasionally grow if left unaddressed. I think about the specific peace settling over me now, having finally shared this complete story with you. No longer carrying it privately, no longer protecting a secret chapter that existed separately from everything else you understood about our relationship. I think about how much that peace matters, how much lighter honesty feels compared to the weight of continued silence. And if you're still here, still listening, still holding everything I've shared tonight close to your heart, I need you to know there's still more unfolding inside me. More of this hard-won, deeply grateful love. I still need you to understand. Especially now. Especially as we continue building forward from this restored foundation. Carrying every lesson this difficult season taught us into whatever comes next. For both of us together.